Numbers 19. The special water that makes people clean. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron. He said, "Here is what the law I have commanded requires. Tell the people of Israel to bring you a young red cow. It must not have any flaws at all. It must never have pulled a load. Give it to the priest Eleazar. It must be taken outside the camp and killed in front of him. Then the priest Eleazar must put some of its blood on his finger. He must sprinkle the blood toward the front of the tent of meeting. He must do it 7 times. While he watches, the young cow must be burned. Its hide, meat, blood, and guts must be burned. The priest must get some cedar wood, branches of a hyssop plant, and bright red wool. He must throw them on the young cow as it burns. After that, the priest must wash his clothes. He must also take a bath. Then he can come into the camp, but he will be unclean until evening. The man who burns the young cow must wash his clothes. He must also take a bath. He too will be unclean until evening. A man who is clean will gather up the ashes of the young cow. He must put them in a place that is clean. That place must be outside the camp. The ashes will be kept by the community of Israel. They will be added to the special water. The water will be used to make the people pure from their sin. The man who gathers up the ashes of the young cow must wash his clothes. He too will be unclean until evening. That law is for the people of Israel. It is also for the outsiders who are living among them. The law will last for all time to come. Anyone who touches a dead person's body will be unclean for 7 days. He must make himself pure and clean with the special water. He must do it on the 3rd day. He must also do it on the 7th day. Then he will be clean. But suppose he does not make himself pure and clean on the 3rd and 7th days. Then he will not be clean. Anyone who touches a dead person's body and does not make himself pure and clean makes my holy tent unclean. He must be cut off from Israel. The special water has not been sprinkled on him, so he is unclean, and he remains unclean. Here is a law that applies when a person dies in a tent. Anyone who enters the tent will be unclean for 7 days. Anyone who is in that tent will also be unclean for 7 days, and anything in it that is open and has no lid will be unclean. Suppose someone is out in the country, and suppose he touches someone who has been killed with a sword, or he touches someone who has died a natural death, or he touches a human bone or a grave. Then anyone who touches any of those things will be unclean for 7 days. Here is what I want you to do for someone who is not clean. Put some ashes from the burned young cow into a jar. Pour fresh water on the ashes. Then a man who is clean must dip branches of a hyssop plant in the water. He must sprinkle the tent with it. Everything that belongs to the tent must be sprinkled with it. The people who were in the tent must also be sprinkled. Anyone who has touched a human bone or grave must be sprinkled. So must anyone who has touched someone who has been killed. So must anyone who has touched someone who has died a natural death. The man who is clean must sprinkle the person who is not. That must be done on the 3rd and 7th days. On the 7th day, the person who is not clean must be made pure and clean. Anyone who is being made clean must wash his clothes. He must take a bath. Then that evening he will be clean. But what if a person who is unclean does not make himself pure and clean? Then he must be cut off from the community. He has made my holy tent unclean. The special water has not been sprinkled on him. He is not clean. That law will apply to all of those people for all time to come. The man who sprinkles the special water must also wash his clothes. Anyone who touches the water will be unclean until evening. Anything that an unclean person touches becomes unclean, and anyone who touches it becomes unclean until evening.